Grimwick the Demon Cat. Book 3, The Tournament. Chapter 21, Penelope vs. Red. After Penelope and Norbert's match, the nurse determined that Norbert had cracked his ribs, broke a leg, fractured a few bones, and had a concussion. Using magic and a numbing potion, they reattached his ribs and advised him no more rigorous exercise, at least for a month. They even gave him a note to excuse him from physical classes and training. Norbert stood up slowly, which was a great relief to Penelope, who had stayed with him as he got patched up. The medical staff asked Norbert if he'd prefer to wait in the contestants' resting room. Norbert shook his head. No, I'd prefer to watch the rest of the matches from the contestants' booth. The nurse smiled. None of the other eliminated students went back out there. Are you sure you want to go back in the booth? Norbert smiled. Of course. I have to cheer on my friends, and perhaps I can learn a thing or two. And besides, Grimwick seems to be enjoying these fights. Grimwick growled. I would have liked them more if we won. As Norbert was escorted back to the contestants' booth, Penelope asked if she could watch the next round from the tunnels. She wanted some time to focus before her next match. Penelope waved Norbert goodbye, and he wished her good luck. The nurse escorted Norbert and Grimwick to the now empty students' booth. Norbert spread out and sat as tall as he could before his ribs kicked him. Grimwick slumped over the railings. Norbert never expected to get this far in the first place. Maybe it was the concussion, but the arena seemed still, and Norbert took it in for the first time. For a brief moment, he felt this is what confidence must feel like. Then a soft voice came from the side. You did really good, Norbert. Norbert jumped and looked towards the voice. Looking at him was a woman roughly his age with white silk hair and a soft smile. And your cat is kinda cute, she added. Grimwick focused on the silk-haired woman and hissed. A paper fan opened in front of her face and a shrill voice came from behind. Hush, princess. Your mother said you could watch the tournament, not talk to its contestants. Norbert sat a little flustered. That seemed like a genuine compliment. He never got many of those. Norbert tried to look back at the woman, but blocking his view now was the Princess Keeper's robes. Her fan by her side still stretched out. The match between Red and the lightning user began with an explosion. Red's opponent fired several lightning bolts at Red, who erected a giant mud wall that absorbed the impact of all the strikes. Red's opponent hurled strike after strike into the mud wall. Red didn't even seem to fight back. She just made the wall taller and wider. In a few moments, the wall was as long as the arena's width and too high for the other student to jump over. Red's opponent slowed their spells. Hiding behind a wall? I think that means I win. Red smiled. No, I think it means I do. She swirled her hand and out of the mud came spikes. Then the wall began to move forward. Hey, you know the rules. You can't maim your opponent. Red started to laugh maniacally. Who said anything about maiming? You can just hop off the stage and it'll all be over. The other student tried to cast more spells. Nothing seemed to break the spikes or slow the advancing wall. The student was growing desperate. They clung to the side of the stage. The spikes were nearly on them. Just before they were about to be skewered, they hopped off the stage. Crazy witch, they huffed under their breath. The spikes receded back into the wall, and the wall fell apart. Mud rushed all over the stage, washing away Red's opponent in a wave of wet dirt. Vine and Red each cast a barrier, but the mud caked every inch of the arena floor. They would have reached up into the stands too, but the proctors put up their shields. Vine glared at Red, who was now bowing elegantly towards the crowd in a fashion that mocked Penelope's approach. Vine waved her hands and a small tornado appeared that sucked up the mud. It was a beautiful display, like a dance of earth and wind. The mud went back into the ground and the stage looked brand new. Nurses had approached Red's opponent, who looked more dizzy than hurt. Red had no injuries and was cleared for the next round. Norbert was astonished. Penelope and Red each won their matches with ease. They didn't even seem to move from their starting positions. He wondered if that was Vine's training or if the two practiced more than they pretended to. It wasn't just the spells that they produced that Norbert felt out of their league. It was their confidence. Penelope always stood tall and faced her targets. Red seemed impervious to the world around her. Norbert felt he was always hunched and all about trying to hide within the crowd. Without being introduced, Penelope emerged from the tunnel and took her place on the tournament stage. Head Mage Turnbill appeared on the stage. He rushed into the middle of Red and Penelope. Thank you all for coming. We'll be hosting a reception after the championship where you can talk with our faculty and our students. Congratulations, Penelope and Red. Best of luck to both of you. Vine entered the center of the ring. Same rules as the previous rounds apply. No magic may be cast until my hand is dropped. Both Penelope and Red nodded, not breaking eye contact from each other. Smiles widened on each of their faces. When Vine dropped her hand, Penelope started her round like her previous ones. She fired a gust of wind. Red erected an aerodynamic stone wall, deflecting the attack easily. Penelope fired a geyser of water, and Red changed her wall to mud to absorb the attack. This exchange went back and forth a few times until Red had a new idea. You think you're the only one with some new tricks? I've learned some of my own, she said. Red reached into the ground and pulled out a large stone hammer, and in a fluid motion launched herself towards Penelope. She brought the hammer down, and Penelope only had a slight chance to roll out of the way. Red was now on the offensive, raising the ground to trip up Penelope as she swung her hammer. Penelope whipped up wind orbs in her hands and began to glide over the obstacles. Red fired mud at Penelope, hoping to pin her down. Some made contact, but before the mud hardened, Penelope blew them off. They both scuttled around the arena for a while until Penelope stepped in a mud puddle that Red had left. The mud was too deep and hardened too quick. Penelope was trapped from the knees down. Red turned and charged with her hammer raised. Penelope wove a spell with her hands, wind spell in one hand and water spell in the other. Red laughed. Wind and water won't work on me. Just when Red was about to swing her hammer on top of Penelope, a spell erupted from Penelope. Wind, water, and snow flushed the arena stage. When the snow settled, Red was trapped in a block of ice mid-swing, only her neck and head free to move. Penelope was still grounded in the earth. Penelope wove a spell and a long icicle formed in her hand and extended slowly towards Red's throat. Red sighed. I yield. Who would have guessed Miss Perfect was hiding ice magic up her sleeves this whole time? I was saving it for a special opponent, Penelope smirked. Red huffed. Nice job, Pigtails. I'll get you next time. Penelope smiled. Well played, Mophead. I'm looking forward to our rematch. Vine waved her hands calling the match, and Penelope began to rise from the ground, and Red was melted from the ice. Vine held up Penelope's arm to the roaring crowd. Among the cheering were Norbert, who was hooting and hollering for both of them. Have some decorum, Grimwick hissed. Norbert didn't stop. The tournament is over, Grimwick. If I recall correctly, everyone on that stage saved our lives on more than one occasion. They aren't your enemies. Plus, if you play your cards right, one of them might agree to be your new host at the end of the semester. Grimwick huffed in agreement and let Norbert continue to make a fool out of himself. And up next in the Grimwick the Demon Cat, Chapter 22, Closing Ceremonies.